Okay, so we're going to be doing chapter 16, the lines chapter for my book, Overcoming ACT Math by Sophia Garcia. It's available on Amazon if you're interested in getting it. Now, if you already have this book, stay for the brief notes at the beginning and then attempt the problems on your own and attempt the corrections on your own first before coming back for the explanations. So let's start with just the notes portion for lines and like a quick couple of reminders. So, this is in chapter 4, the math formulas chapter, and the most important thing that you need to remember is this guy right here, that y is equal to mx plus b. That's the equation for a line. Now, you could also have something like f of x is equal to, and then all of this, or it could be like h of t, and then the x is t. Like, there's all different versions of this, but essentially it follows the same format of slope times whatever's representing x plus the y-intercept equals y. Now, if you want to find slope and you're given 2 points, what you can do is use this formula for slope. So if they give you 2 points, like let's say that they give you, I don't know, let's try like 1, 3, and then 0, 2. You can label these as, let's say, x1, y1, and x2, y2. It could be the reverse as well. The important part is that the 2's go together, like the little 2's and the little 1's go together. So all you would do is you would just fill this in and you would say 2 minus 3 over and then 0 minus 1 because you see how I'm filling it into the formula as needed. So then this is going to be negative 1 over negative 1, which is just positive 1, would be that slope right there. Now also remember that y-intercept can be written as 0 comma y-intercept because you plug in 0 for the opposite when finding intercept. So if you're finding y-intercept, plug in 0 for x. If you're finding x-intercept, plug in 0 for y. Now this is what they would look like on the graph, like the point that would be a part of the line would be on the graph for, like it would be showing the y-intercept like this. The y-intercept would be the point that's touching the y-axis, and the x-intercept would be the point that's touching the x-axis right there. So that's just a couple of quick reminders before we start this chapter. So give me 1 second to, let me move that. Okay. So let's start with number 1. It says that we have this equation right here, and it says Anna Maria is trying to replicate her grandmother's famous cookie recipe. The equation above can be used to determine how many cups of flour, F, should be added to a mixing bowl with S cups of sugar. What is the meaning of 3 in this equation? So the 3 right here, remember, if we're thinking in terms of y is equal to mx plus b, in this case the b is on the left-hand side, right here. If we're thinking in terms of y is equal to mx plus b, the 3, or we should say really negative 3, is the slope. So the slope, m, is negative 3. Now, remember, slope is also thought about as the change in y over the change in x. So what's representing y here would be f. So it's talking about the change in f over the change in s. Remember, f is cups of flour and s is cups of sugar. So negative 3 is the same thing as negative 3 over 1. So if we're thinking in terms of these units of cups of flour and cups of sugar, it should match with this negative 3 right here. So this is saying we should have 3 less, that's what the negative's for, like 3 fewer, 3 less cups of sugar, or sorry, flour, for each cup of sugar, because S is representing a cup of sugar. So for every 1 or each cup of sugar. So you can use that little trick of like matching up units to kind of figure out a lot of these linear equation problems where like you have to interpret what certain numbers mean in that context. So let's look for 3 fewer cups of flour for every cup of sugar. So this one says that exactly. For every cup of sugar in the mixing bowl, 3 fewer cups of flour should be added. So that would be C. So then let's go to number 2. For number 2, it says line M is graphed below line N intersects. So like this is M. So I'm going to just write that right there so we don't get confused. Line N intersects line M at this point. Given that line N is perpendicular to line M, which of the following points must line N pass through? Okay, so this is line M, and they told us that line N, the one we're interested in, is perpendicular. Now we know that perpendicular means that it has a negative or opposite reciprocal slope. So if I can figure out the slope of this right over here, then I can just take the negative reciprocal of it to help me create my equation for line n. Someone asked if I'm a teacher. I used to be, now I'm just a tutor. So let's go and see. Let's see, this has a y-intercept of 3, so 0, 3 is one of the points. And this is another point, 0.51, this guy right here is another point on this line. Remember, if we have 2 points, we can find slope. So the slope for line M is going to be equal to, let's do negative 0.058 minus 3 over 0.51 minus 0. All I'm doing is the slope formula where we just plug in our 2 points there. So then when we do that, we should get negative 3.05, negative 3.058 over 0.51. And then that's the slope of line M. Now remember, slope of line N, the other line that we're interested in, is the negative reciprocal of this. Or the opposite reciprocal is another way that people say it. So like opposite as in you change the sign. So we're going to change the sign of this from negative to positive and flip it so that it's 0.51 over 3.058 for our slope for line N. So now if we're writing an equation for line N, it's going to be that y is equal to 0.51 over 3.058 times x plus whatever the y-intercept b is for that line N. Now, what we can do is we can say, okay, I'm going to now solve for what the y-intercept is, b, by plugging in the point of intersection, because this is a point x comma y that works on both line M and line N. So if I plug that in for x and y here, I should be able to solve for b. So it would be negative 0.058 for y is equal to 0.51 over 3.058 times 0.51 plus b. So now I would just put that into my calculator and solve for b. So when I do that, I'm going to get 0.058 is equal to 0.2601 over 3.058, and then I would just subtract this whole thing from each side. So it's going to cancel out there. So then we're really doing like minus 0.058 minus, it's really hard to say all these like decimals and everything without messing it up, minus 0.2601 over 3.058. And that's going to equal what b is over here. So when we solve all that and we plug it into our calculator, we're going to get that b is approximately, so I'm going to do the little squiggly, b is approximately negative 0.14305 yada yada yada. So that's the y-intercept over here that we can plug in for b, for this equation of a line. Now that I have what my y-intercept is, I know that it's negative let's just say 0.143. Now that I know what that is, I can say, okay, I have these options right here. I'm going to plug in an x value and see if I get the correct y. And I see that 0.25 is repeating 3 times versus the 6 that's repeating 2 times. So I'm going to start with that, because if it's wrong, then I can eliminate more answer choices than if I just figured out that like both of these are wrong, you know? So I'm going to now plug in 0.254x into this equation over here. So I'm going to say y is equal to 0.51 over 3.058 times 0.25 for x plus negative 0.143. And then we're going to plug that into the calculator. This is for ACT for the person that asked, which is why I'm using calculator. So we plug that into our calculator, and we're going to get that it is closest to this one. It's like a repeating, or like not repeating, but like a decimal that goes on forever, but it's not necessarily repeating. It's like negative 0.101 yada yada yada. So it's going to be this guy right here. So let's now go to number 3. So number 3 says, Paul has only $120 in credit left on his credit card. He intends to use the remaining solely on his internet service plan. If his plan charges $1 per gigabyte for data usage, which function f of g below could be used to predict how much money he will have after g gigabytes of data usage? So $120 is what he has left in credit on his credit card. And then it says that he's being charged $1 per every g gigabyte of data usage. So like this is kind of like, think of it as how much money he has to spend. And then we're going to subtract the 1 gigabyte or $1 for every g gigabytes of data. So then let's see which one of those matches. So that would be B, right over there. So then let's go to number 4. Kay, Tim, and their friend have $40 in total to spend on dinner. The price of a burger is $4.50 and the price of an order of fries is $2. Suppose they each get 2 burgers. How many orders of fries can they get? So we want to know how many orders of fries. So there's those three friends all together, Kay, Tim, and their random friend. So they're going to each get, what was it, 2 burgers? Yeah, 2 burgers. So there's 3 friends. And each of them are getting 2 burgers, and each of those burgers costs $4.50. So the amount that they're spending on burgers is represented by this. So when you multiply that all out, you're going to get that that's $27 that they're spending on burgers. Now, they have $40 in total to spend. So if we want to know how much they have left to spend on fries, we have to subtract the amount they're spending on burgers from that total amount that they have to spend today. So then that would be $13 when you subtract that, and that's going to be the amount that they could spend on the fries. Now, each order of fries is $2. So if they have $13 and each order of fries is $2, we could divide 13 by 2 to find out how many orders of fries they can get. And you don't get an exact, like a whole number, you get 6.5. So we have to think about this logically in the context of a problem. You can't go to a restaurant and order like half of a fry, like a half order of fries. I mean, like some places do, but like, you know what I mean. Like there's no, in a general sense, we're not going to order like a half tray of fries or whatever. So it's going to be that there's 6 orders of fries that they can get. G. This is for ACT, but a lot of it applies to the SAT as well. Number 5, what is the slope of the line with the following equation right here? So what I'm going to do is, remember for the equation of a line, it's always y equals mx plus b, so try to get y by itself. It doesn't necessarily matter for this problem, but I just like to teach students to get in the habit of it because it'll matter for other problems. So just add 4 to each side. So then we're going to have a 4th times x plus 9 plus 4, and then let's distribute the 1/4 and combine our like terms. So then we get 1/4 x plus 9/4 plus 4. And remember, in y equals mx plus b, the number in front of m, when you get y by itself, is going to be your slope. So the slope should be 1/4. So now let's go to number 6. So line M and N are graphed in the xy coordinate plane as shown below. Where do line M and N intersect, assuming that these lines are perpendicular and line N has a y-intercept of -4? Okay. So remember, perpendicular, whenever they tell you that word and you're working with lines, you need to remember perpendicular lines have opposite reciprocal slopes. So here they said that we have these 2 points on line M. So if we find the slope for line M, we can then take the opposite or negative reciprocal to find the slope of line N. So let's put this into the slope formula, and let's say 3 minus 0 over, or divided by, 0 minus 1 gives us the slope of this line, so that would be just -3. -3 is the same thing as -3 over 1, if that helps you visualize things better. So that means that the slope of line N, sorry, they're so similar, getting the words confused or letters. So the slope of line N, the one that's perpendicular over here, is going to be the flip of this, so 1/3, and then you change the sign to a positive. So the slope of this line is 1/3. So now let's write out an equation for that. And we can fill in what the y-intercept is as well, because they told us that it's -4. So we could say y is equal to 1/3 x minus 4. So now, if I want to find out, it was, what does it say? Where do they intersect? So what I can do now is I can say, okay, I could pretty easily write an equation of this up here. And I could say that this is going to be negative 3x plus the y-intercept 3. Sorry, I forgot to do that really quick. It was just like kind of skipping ahead. We have the equation up here. We have the equation down here. Where they intersect is going to be where they're equal to each other. So we could say I'm going to do negative 3x plus 3 is equal to 1/3 x minus 4. So then now I'm going to just add 4 to each side because I'm trying to get like my numbers together and my x's together. So I'm going to add 4 to each side. And then that's going to give me this. And now I'm going to add 3x to each side so I can get the x's together on the other side. So when I do that, that would be 1/3 x plus 3x, which 3x is the same thing as 3 over 1 times x, which is the same thing as 9/3 times x. So I can now say, okay, I'm going to combine my like terms there, and I'm going to get that 7 is equal to 10/3 x. So then I multiply each side by 3/10. You can think of it as like multiply, as if you're dividing by 10/3, like dividing by a fraction is the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal, by the flip. So that's why I'm just skipping to that. So I'm going to times by 3/10 on each side. Then it's going to be 21 over 10 is equal to x, which is just 2.1. So 2.1 has to definitely be the x value. So it can't be these guys. And then we're just going to plug that into one of the equations. So like we could just plug that in to one of the equations right here. Let's just put 2.1 in for x and see what we get. So when you put that into your calculator, you're going to get negative 3.3. So it's going to be f. Okay, so let's keep on going. Number 7 says, Ben's test score this year is 30 points more than 1.5 times his test score from last year. If he scores 140 points this year, then then what equation can be used to find his score from last year? So these are all equal to x, his score from last year. So x is his score from last year. So his score this year is 1.5 times the last year's score, x, plus 30, because it's 30 points more, and it's equal to 140 for his test score this year. Now, we're trying to get x by itself, as we can see in the answer choices, so what we would do is we have to subtract 30 and divide by 1.5 to get x by itself. The one that says we do that is A. So that would be our answer. Give me 1 second to get water, guys. Okay. So let's go to number 8. It says, Doris solved a linear equation using the following steps. Step 1, add 14 to both sides of the equation. Step 2, multiply both sides of the resulting equation by 3. Which of the following equations is the equation that Doris solved? So which of these would you start solving for x by adding 14 to each of the sides? Well, it couldn't be this one because I would start by subtracting 14. It can't be this one because I would start by adding 12. It can't be this one because I would start by subtracting 14. And it could be these two because I would just be adding 14 on each side as the first step. So I would add 14 on each side as the first step. Over here, that would leave me with, that would be 26 over here. So I'm adding 14 to each side. It cancels out there, and then it becomes 26 over here. And then the next step that we were supposed to do is multiply each side by 3. Well, G would be the correct answer because that's what we would do with G. We would divide by 1/3, which is the same thing as multiplying by 3. So the answer should be G. So let's now go to number 9. The following points lie on the same line. These are the points, therefore B must be. So we're solving for what B is here. So let's use the points A and C to find the slope of this line that we're talking about. And thank you guys so much for the likes. Please share this with your friends who need to practice for the SAT and ACT. So we're going to do 0 minus 7, because I'm subtracting the y's, and then I'm subtracting the x's, 2 minus 4, to figure out what my slope is. So then it's going to be negative 7 over negative 2, which is just 7/2. So that's my slope. So if I'm writing an equation of a line, it's going to be y is equal to mx plus b, so m is 7/2, plus whatever the y-intercept is, b. Now, I'm going to plug in one of the points. I'm going to pick 2, 0, because it's easier than working with 4 and 7. So I'm going to plug in 0 for my y, because remember, a point is just an x, y. So 0 is my y, and 7/2 times what my x value is, 2, plus b is what I have on this side. Now I'm able to solve for b. These cancel out, so then I just have 7. I'm going to subtract 7 from each side, so I get negative 7 is equal to b. So now I could put that back into this equation right here, and I have a full linear equation. So this would be my linear equation. Now remember, I'm trying to solve for b, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this as my x and y, the 5 and the b. And then I'm going to solve for what b is. So b is my y, and then I'm going to have 5 as my x, and then minus 7. So now I'm going to solve for b. So it's going to be 35 over 2 minus 7 is the same thing as 7 over 1. So if I multiply by 2 on top and bottom, I would get 14 over 2. So now I can subtract my fractions because they have a common denominator. So then this is going to be 21 over 2. So that would be D. Okay, let me get water again, guys, sorry. Okay, so number 10, and please share this with your friends, guys. I'm a small business, so like if I could sell any books or like any cramming guide series or anything like that, it really helps out and allows me to do more of these free lives. So then let's go to number 10. Amber's monthly profit from her music is related to the number of downloads from listeners on music streaming platforms. This relationship can be represented by the function right here, where D is the number of downloads, and this is the Amber's monthly profit. If Amber wants to have a monthly profit, so she wants to have a P of D of 1,500, then how many downloads does she need? So D is downloads. So what we're going to do is we're going to put in 1,500 right over here, and that's going to be equal to all of this on the right-hand side. And then you'll see we're interested in finding out what D is. Well, now we only have one unknown in our equation that we can just solve for. We can just solve all this out and find D. So let's do that. So this would be 1,500. I'm going to distribute the 10 to each of the terms inside of my parentheses. So 10 times 42 is 420. 10 times 2D is going to be 20D. And now I'm going to subtract 420 from each side of the equation. So if I subtract 420 from each side of the equation, that's going to give me 1,080. 1,080, and that's going to equal 20D. So now, to get D by itself, I have to divide by 20 on each side, and that's going to give me that D is equal to 54, so the answer would be G. Thank you guys for liking and sharing the live. It helps a lot. So, let's see if we have any questions. No, someone just said, oh, this is so nice of you. I enjoyed math sometimes, but it was LOL, but I was really good at algebra especially. Yeah, I loved algebra. I like, that's my favorite out of everything. So let's go to number 11. Oh, and also with people that are saying, like, can you do it again? Just know that these all get uploaded onto my YouTube later. So my YouTube name is the same as my TikTok, AG Tutoring. So you'll be able to like rewind and see this again. And then I did the SAT. They didn't give us scratch paper. Well, you can write in the test book on the SAT. Okay, so then let's keep going. So for number 11, it says, what is the slope of the line with the following equation right here? Now, where people mess up a lot on the SAT exam that they expect you to mess up on, and like one of the ways that they try to trick you, is by giving you an equation like this where y is not by itself. For us to be able to say like, hey, the number in front of x is our slope, we have to make sure y is by itself first in that equation. So we have to get y by itself. Well, how do we do that? We subtract 5x from each side. And then we're left with 2y is equal to 6 minus 5x. Now I have to divide by 2 to get y by itself. So if I divide by 2, 6 divided by 2 is 3, and then minus 5 halves times x. Now I have y by itself, so I can say, oh, the number being multiplied by x is my slope. So that would be negative 5 halves, D. Good job for everyone that said D. So let's keep going. We're on number 12 now. So it says, Hannah spent $200 on materials and travel to start a house cleaning service. She charges $30 for each house she cleans. During her first week, Hannah made $70 after the cost of materials and travel was deducted. If X is the number of houses Hannah cleaned during the first week, then which equation best represents the scenario? Now, really quick, one thing that you can use as a trick on the exam, now be careful because this does not always work, but it works like I would say 9 out of 10 times, is anytime you see where they're asking you to write an equation for one of the answer choices and they're using the words each, per, or they straight up tell you like slope or rate, the number that it's referring to is going to be, in most cases, the number that you're multiplying by x in the y equals mx plus b equation. So if you had no idea what you were doing, you could just look at the answer choices and say, okay, 30 needs to be multiplied by what's acting as x in our equation. So it probably needs to be either f or j. Now remember, that doesn't always work, but that's just like kind of like a little tip. So we want to know, she made $70 after deducting the cost of materials. So she's making $30 for every X house, right? So 30 times X is going to be how much money she's getting for cleaning all those houses, but we have to subtract her expenses, which is $200. And that's going to give us the money that she made after we deducted those expenses, which is 70. So then the correct answer would be F. So let's go to number 13. Which of the following is the graph for this? So remember, again, whenever you see like a linear equation, you want to get it in y equals mx plus b format to help you out. So let's add 3x to each side. When we do that, we get 15 plus 3x. And then we're going to divide by 5 to get y by itself. So then 15 divided by 5 is 3 plus 3/5 x. So the reason I'm doing this is because when I get y by itself, I can now know more about what my slope is and what my y-intercept is. So this equation tells me the number by itself, b, my y-intercept, has to be positive 3. So that tells me that I need a line that's touching the y-axis at 3. So it could be this one, it could be this one. It can't be this one, because that's negative 3. It could be this one, and then it could be this one. So then, now I'm going to look at the slope. 3/5 is my slope. So it's a positive slope. So positive slopes need to look like this. From left to right, they're increasing. So it could be this one. It cannot be this one. This is decreasing. It cannot be this one. This is decreasing. It could be this one. This is increasing. Now I have to ask myself, okay, with the remaining choices, this choice and this choice, what's different about them? Well, I see that the x-intercepts are different. Where they cross the x-axis is different. So since I have an equation, let me find out what the x-intercept is. Well, how do we find x-intercept? Remember, with intercepts, you plug in 0 for the opposite variable. So if I'm finding x-intercept, I plug in 0 for y. So it's going to be 0 is equal to 3 plus 3/5 x. And I'm going to solve for what x is for my x-intercept. So I'm going to subtract 3 on each side. And it's going to be negative 3 is equal to 3/5 x. So now I'm going to multiply each side by 5/3, because like dividing by 3/5 is the same as multiplying by 5/3 on each side to get x by itself. And then I'm going to get that x is equal to, that would be negative 15 over 3, which is just equal to negative 5 as my x-intercept. So that matches there. It does not match, where was it? It does not match this one. So it has to be A. Okay, so let's go to number 14. Computer company makes laptops. I know, sorry, I was not very creative when coming up with this. Computer company makes laptops. It costs the company $15,000 to rent out the space to make the laptops and $100 per laptop made. Assuming each laptop sells for $150 and computer company wants to break even, how many laptops do they need to make? This is another one that I feel like it's kind of unfair for some students, because it's such an easy thing, but they get it wrong because they don't know what break even means. So just so you know, break even means that you don't necessarily make money, but you don't lose money. It's your profit is 0. That's what break even means. So you have to keep that in mind here. It's you could also think of it as your expenses equal your revenue. So it says that it costs them $15,000. So their expenses are going to be $15,000 plus the $100 per every X laptop. X will be how many laptops are made and sold. And so that's their expenses, and it needs to equal how much money they're bringing in for selling these laptops, which is going to be equal to $150 times each of the X laptops that they sell. So now I'm just going to solve for X to know how many laptops they need to make to break even. So I'm going to subtract 100X from each side. That's going to give me 15,000 is equal to 50X. Then I'm going to divide by 50 on each side. And then when I divide by 50 on each side, that's going to be that X is equal to 300, so it's going to be K. Okay, good job for everyone that said K. This is actually really helpful for learning to show your work. I always struggle with how much to write. So, so actually you don't have to show your work just so you know on the SAT, but like I understand in like school you're saying that. But for the SAT and ACT, you don't need to do that. Why is $15,000 on the left side? Because it said that it's going to cost them, the $15,000 is like them renting the factory space or whatever. Plus I guess the cost of materials is $100 per laptop. So that's why it's part of the expenses, because expenses need to equal like your revenue when you're breaking even. So all I did to get 300 was divide by 50 on each side. So 15,000 divided by 50 to get X by itself gives you 300. So let me get water really quick, guys. One sec. Oh, and I almost skipped 15. Whoopsies. Okay, so number 15. Given that a line passes through this and this, what is the equation of line? Okay, we have 2 points. I swear to God, they should sponsor me. I sell so many of these pens. The pen is Papermate Ink Joy Gel 0.7. Okay, so let's go to this one. We have to find the equation of a line, which is y equals mx plus b. So the slope, m, if we have 2 points, is just going to be like us using the slope formula where you subtract the y's over the subtracted x's. So the slope, or m, is going to be equal to b minus 3, I'm subtracting the y's, over 1 minus 2. So that's going to be equal to b minus 3 over negative 1. Now let's divide that by negative 1. So then that would be negative b plus 3. Now you'll see that doesn't look like what's being multiplied by x here. It's a little bit different. That's because this is the same thing as saying, actually let me write it here so I don't get too messy. This is the same thing as saying 3 minus b. So 3 minus b is something I see in everything except a, so these are my remaining choices. Now I have to figure out what the y-intercept is to figure out which of these equations is correct. So let's see, up here they give us an x and a y with this point of 2, 3. So let's plug in to our equation, which now we know y is equal to mx plus b. M is 3 minus b times x. And instead of writing b, I'm going to say that that's y-intercept because b means something different in the context of our problem. So plus y-intercept so that people don't get confused. So then what I'm going to do is plug in 2 for x and 3 for y and solve for my y-intercept. So 3 is going to be y. And then my x is going to be 2. And then now I'm just going to solve for the y-intercept. So 3 is equal to 2 times 3 is 6. 2 times negative b minus 2b plus the y-intercept. So then I'm going to subtract 6 from each side. That gives me negative 3 is equal to negative 2b plus the y-intercept. So now to solve for y-intercept, I'm going to add 2b to each side. So it's negative 3 plus 2b is equal to the y-intercept. Now, remember, this is what's supposed to be going here in our equation, where y-intercept is. So negative 3 plus 2b needs to go there. Another way of saying negative 3 plus 2b is 2b minus 3, which is right there for E. So it has to be answer choice E. When would you ever need this? Does this help us in life? Guys, most of you are not going to need this in your life. I'm not going to lie to you. I am just a test prep tutor and general tutor that is trying to help you just get through to college if you want to take these exams. So then let's go to number 16. The graph of y, I mean, it does, some of these are useful in like real life, but I'm saying like in your day-to-day life, you're probably never going to use these yourself. So then let's see. Number 16 says the graph of this does not travel through. So these are talking about the quadrants. Now the quadrants, this is going to be quadrant 1. This is quadrant 2. It's kind of like it starts from 1 to 4 counterclockwise is how I remember it. So then here would be like quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, quadrant 4. So if we started to graph this line right here, we would say that the y-intercept is 5, because remember, y equals mx plus b. The y-intercept is b, 5. So like somewhere up here. The m, the number being multiplied by x, is negative 1. So we have a negative slope. So it's going to look something like this right over here. So we'll see it's going through the first one, it's going through the second one, it's going through the fourth one, but it does not go through the third one. So it would be h. Number 17 says the line y equals 5 does not pass through, so does not pass through. If we were to graph this, let's say that 5 happens to be right here. So y equals 5 is just a straight line this way through 5 on the y-axis. So you could graph it and you could like kind of visualize it to see which of these points would not pass through, or you could say, hey, the y has to equal 5. I know every point is x comma y, so that means that the number that's on the right-hand side over here has to be 5. So this is good, this is good, this is not good. So it cannot pass through 3. Or Roman numeral 3, that's what I meant. Okay, so let's go to number 18. The slope of the line that passes through the points, this and this, is, so remember, slope is just the, you could just, if you have 2 points, plug it into the slope formula, which says that the slope is equal to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. You can label your points if, like, you're bad at, like, keeping track of what's y2, y1, all of that, or you could just remember that you're always going to start with the same point, subtract the y's over the subtracted x's. So I'm going to say that it's the subtracted y's 2 minus negative 3 over the subtracted x's 4 minus 4. Now, minus and minus is plus, so this is going to be 5 on top, and then 4 minus 4 is 0. Now, we can never ever divide by 0, so this, whoops, that looked bad. This is no solution, like undefined. Okay. So let's go to number 19. What is the equation of the line passing through these points? Again, remember, you can use the slope formula to find the slope, which will help you figure out the equation, because m, the number being multiplied by x in whatever your equation is, has to be the slope. So let's find the slope here. We're going to say it's the y subtracted, so 5.2 minus 3, over the x's subtracted, negative 6 minus negative 4. Just remember, if you do the like y subtracted over x subtracted, you have to make sure that you're starting with the same point. Like you see how 5.2 and negative 6 are from the same point? Just make sure you're consistent in that way. So then let's see. We're going to say that 5.2 minus 3 is going to be 2.2 over minus a minus is a plus. So negative 6 plus 4 is negative 2. If I simplify this, it's negative 1.1 as my slope. So the number being multiplied by x is my slope, and it has to be negative 1.1. The only one that says that is A, so it would have to be A. So let's go to number 20 now. A toy car travels at a constant rate along a straight path. The table below shows the relationship between the distance d in inches that the toy car has traveled and the time since the toy car began moving t in seconds. Which of the following could be the equation that represents this scenario? Okay, so this is going to be in the format of y is equal to mx plus b, except now we have, instead of x, they're using t, and instead of y, they're using d. So remember, the slope, m, is going to be the change in y, or in this case, the change in d, over the change in x, which in this case would be the change in t. So we want to know what's the change in d over the change in t to find our slope. Well, to go from 12 to 16, it would be plus 4. 1 to 2 is plus 1. So the change in d is going to be equal to 4 over the change in t, which is 1. So the slope should just be positive 4. So we should have 4t as part of our equation. So it can't be this one, can't be this one, can't be this one. Now we have to decide what's the correct y-intercept. Well, this is going up 1 each time, right, for the t values. If we go the opposite way, down 1, we would get to t equaling 0. So let's go the opposite way over here. Let's start at 12 and let's go 4 backwards to find out what we get when t is 0. Well, 12 minus 4 is 8. So then I would have 8 as my y-intercept, because remember, y-intercept is what the y is, or in this case d, when the other variable is equal to 0. So this would be 4t plus 8. So it would be j. Okay, so that is the lines chapter. Let me just see, what was I going to do next? Hold on. I'm trying to remember like what I have to record so that I don't like waste this live. What's on my list? Quiz number 6 is next. Okay. So